because I know that we have a number of folks who are working in the linguistics field, and I am excited to hear from them. But I want to just broaden the background of a couple of people that aren't necessarily linguists, but will contribute to all of this. And I want to recognize two people and just have them just say hello for a minute. Dr. Howard Beckman, good morning. You can just turn your mute off, turn your mic on, and just join us by welcoming, and then we'll say hello to Dr. Atkinson.
Hi, I'm pleased to work with you all. I've worked with a linguist for 20 years on doctor-patient communication, and have great respect for the contribution that linguistics can make to improving the communication amongst patients and doctors, between doctors and doctors, between employers and employees, and healthcare workers in general. So I look forward to the conversations that will come now.
Thank you, Dr. Beckman. I want to offer all of you to have a chance to watch his presentation. Very thoughtful and empowering to see his approach to thinking about how U.S. healthcare, as expensive it is not doing what it should be doing. And those of us who are in it have seen it from that side. Those of you who are outside this, it may be emboldening for you in thinking about your systems. But thank you very much. Dr. Atkinson, good morning.
Good morning. I am a faculty member in medical education at the TCU and UNTHSC School of Medicine in Fort Worth, Texas. And this is really an exciting breath of fresh air for me to see a conference like this, because I'm also a practicing child and adolescent psychiatrist for 30 years as of this year. Yes, and Dr. Ryder, I have to tell you, I was just really enjoying watching your presentation and thinking, wow, we have here a pediatrician and a social worker. She's singing some of my love languages as she's talking in her presentation. And I think the thing that I am really grateful for is that this is an opportunity to spotlight the common humanity that all of us have across the globe, the challenges that we have across the globe. And I know in my little part of the world that one of the things we see is that those who are helpers and caretakers of others, as in the physicians, in the faculty, get completely disconnected from their own humanity and their own wellness needs at time, which is what our work is in. I also want to just make a quick comment about the relatively new medical school where I work. We are seating our third class as of now. And we have a major focus about the compassionate practice and what we call the empathetic scholar at our school. And we are really trying to work to help change healthcare to bring these very factors into play that are being discussed here at this conference. So I was delighted and excited when I stumbled across the opportunity to be a part of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I appreciate your statement of the issues of humanity, because I think that one of the things I've learned from the linguists, I think Dr. Beckman also alluded to this, is the way that they help us as physicians and caregivers see our own selves differently by understanding the language. And I want to thank you for that. I'd like to ask Dr. Pasquale to unmute herself and to say a few words, please, and then we'll go to Dr. Yin.
Well, I am a linguist, and I've been working on discourse and health for a few years. Particularly, I'm interested in the experience of pain. And what I do is I look at chronic pain. So I work in Chile. I work at the Catholic University in Santiago de Chile. But I am originally from Argentina, so I've been comparing the experiences in different countries. And I also work with the people from Manchester Metropolitan University in the UK. So we are trying to discover how we can help from a very critical and at the same time very human perspective. Improve the communication between doctors and patients, but also improve the treatment, the the communication in every aspect that we exchange with the patients. I've been working with people who suffer endometriosis, women. It's a gynecological condition, yes. But in this case, the experience of the pandemic has proved to have a lot of things in common with the experience of chronic pain. So the type of metaphors that emerge, and that is why I found Dr. Matthison's proposal so interesting. The experience of the use of metaphors that we have come across is very similar to the ones that are used in chronic pain experiences. So I think that there's a lot that we can contribute, and I think that there's a lot that we can do. I work with the people from the medical humanities, so I feel very comfortable working with people from other disciplines, particularly with people from the health sciences. And well, I'm willing to help, and I think that we can all do something really, really helpful for others.
Thank you. I think that you just really highlighted one of the key and wonderful things about this group, as Dr. Matheson says, as this community comes together, and that is, as we learn to work and understand each other and work together and to move forward, there are tremendous potentials here working across the global community, which I think there are very few opportunities for that otherwise, and this is very exciting. Dr. Yin, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
I can't hear you, Dr. Yin. Are you able to? Can other people hear him? I
Closer
can't.
to the mic, Surya.
Yeah. Just double check that your mic is on.
Yeah, it's on.
It's on. It's just you're very faint.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Good. I'm having a hard time, but I hope others can. Yes, please. Hello. Good morning.
Can you go to other people when I fix my mic?
That's better.
Hello? Yes, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's much better.
Yes, thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
Good morning. Welcome.
Good evening from Cambodia.
Please share a bit about yourself with us so that we will have a chance to get to know you better.
Okay, so my name is Surya Yin. I'm an associate professor at American University of Phnom Penh, Cambodia. My background is in my bachelor in education, some sort of linguistic. I major in English literature, and then my master degree in tourism. And then I did my PhD and my postdoc in natural resource science and management and urban planning. Yeah. So at AUP, I teach. So I'm very glad today that COVID-19 pandemic cannot stop us from meeting each other. So this is a wonderful opportunity that we can meet and share our thoughts about our research interests. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you. I'm seeing other friends in the audience as well, and some folks that I don't know. Elaine, good morning.
Hello, good morning. Want me to say something also?
Please. Yes, absolutely.
Yes, first of all, I want to thank Hedra for organizing this beautiful event. Interdisciplinary, cross-cultural, and I think, as all of you have said, we have a lot to learn from each other. I'm Brazilian and I've worked in many places, Hong Kong, Chile, Mariana, and now I returned to Brazil. Now I'm in 4 years. And once you arrive in a different place, you start having a look and trying to find a place where you can contribute to. And this has happened to me in the past 2 years. From Hong Kong, I worked in healthcare communication, but I'm a linguist. I worked MA and PhD in translation studies and interfacing with SFL. But then when I arrived in Hong Kong, I saw this breadth of his research in healthcare areas. And this in Brazil is still very, very scarce. If you had the chance to hear to my talk, we found in medicine, for example, from 1988 up to now, so more than 30 years, not more than 10 papers, including journal articles, PhD research, and MA dissertation. We move into pharmaceutical sciences. It's the same situation, even lower. So we have, and I'm talking about interfaces of linguistics, applied linguistics more specifically, and healthcare studies. So we carried out this, I called it a short cartography, to figure out where and how we can contribute to the area of applied linguistics and healthcare. So I'm in this niche, and we just formed a group, a small group of students with myself, and we're going to the different areas that we can reach out. So I have 2 of my PhD students here with me. One of them is looking into the pharmaceutical sciences. Maybe he can say something later about this, which is Macilon Jr. You can call him Junior. And also Eric. And then when Dr. Atkinson said that she works in with psychotherapy, right? This is a research area that we, during the pandemic, started looking at, because we had this abrupt change to consultations that they were face-to-face. And to me, a linguist, it's much better to talk face-to-face to a therapist, but then all of a sudden it changed to online. So our interest was, how did this affect or not the patient and therapist relationship? So this is where we're working now, carrying out the research also into hospitals here. But one of the difficulties we have, and this can be seen in the data we found is the problem, and this I'm quoting, double quoting, the problem of being a linguist. Because when you say you're a linguist, people expect that you're gonna correct their language. So it's still the traditional way of looking at the language. So the first thing we're trying to do is to clear up this misconception of a linguist, so as to start contributing. And in the area of the university, it's quite good for us at the moment, because the new president of the university, he's a psychologist. And so he's really interested in working with linguists. So this is the scene, the picture of my Brazil, because I'm in the Northeast, and Brazil is so big, just like Dr. Atkinson said, in my little Brazil, right? In my little part of the world. So very good to see many of my friends here and to meet other people. And I hope we can contribute globally to healthcare and education.
Folks, I think we should also ask Dr. Pat Fung to introduce herself. And I believe you have a graduate student in the group as well. Is that correct? Go ahead, please.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. Yes, good afternoon. And I'm very pleased to be here. As Dr. Christina has mentioned, I'm from Thailand. And today I have got my MA student. I think that she is the new star for us today. She is a hardworking student, Kittima. And you will see her presentation later. But before we go into in the business of presentation, I'm really pleased to be here and part of the community. And it is a great opportunity because it is a good reunion. I met Christian, I met Elaine, and then I met new colleagues from different disciplinaries. So I'm very pleased, and I'm a linguist. I was trained in systemic functional linguistics by Christian Matheson. He is my supervisor for my MA and PhD. And we have know one another for nearly 20 years. So we have got a very strong bond together, and very, very pleased to see Christian today. And I'm very pleased to introduce my student, Kittima, to the community today. Thank you so very much.
Hi, Kittima. Good to see
Hi,
you.
everyone. Good to see you too. Okay, and sorry, I think I am so excited because it is my international conference ever, but actually it is my conference ever in my life. I'm sorry for my limited speaking skill here. Okay, and as Dr. Patama invited me to this conference, and I think a lot that I should be here, but I accept her at least because I want to be in the path of research, and I want myself to have a big door for opportunity about the linguistics. I am a linguistics student, and I love this course the most. So this academic paper, I'm sorry, I'm so excited and I don't know what to speak.
Well,
Okay. Once I have to use what to do on my academic paper, I choose the topic about the COVID-19 because it is really up to date. And then I think for linguistics, it can be more just a language. It can integrate with many areas of academic. And I did the research in the first wave in Thailand, the first wave of COVID in Thailand. And I think it is like a new thing in the world. So I decided to do with the infographic because like a MCDA or multimodal critical discussion analysis is really interesting and really new in Thai linguistic study. So I make it, and according to that, and according to the paper I made, it bring me here to meet all of you from the diverse academic area, and I think it should be my little step that make me to the successful part of my study. Oh, I'm sorry, I am so excited. I'm sorry, but thank you for having me here. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I will try my best in another study if I still have a chance to do that. Thank you.
Please join our studies, definitely.
Oh,
Thank
yeah,
you.
I want to say thank you. And this district, see, you've got a heart already from Elaine on the screen. But just what I had just said, in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. So those of us who are older, we might be a little more, the word might be jaded or stuck in our ways. But when we have new people with new thoughts and new ideas, like what you were describing that you're doing with COVID in Thailand, it just opens up everything. So I want to thank you and all of you for being here. Even though even those who this is your first conference, it's a great place to start.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So folks, I would like to introduce Dr. Duygu Ikinci, who is in Turkey. And we are very, very pleased to have her with us. Oh, she disappeared. That's it. Oh, there you are. Hello, Duygu. How are you? Can you turn your microphone on?
Yes, sure.
There we are. So we have been working together on, oh, and here's Alia from Egypt. We have been working together on this whole thing about students trying to learn online. And it is not straightforward. And it's not straightforward for faculty either. So Duygu, will you introduce yourself and explain about your amazing family and your sister who is also an academic and the project that we are working on?
Oh, okay. Actually, I am not a linguistic. I am a chemist in Turkey, in Atatürk University. I am also very excited. We used online education almost 1.5 years, but it is not very nice, especially for our major. In chemistry, we have to work in laboratory, but our students watched online experimental works. That is not enough. Their future, in their future, they have to learn how they can use the equipments, laboratory equipments. So I think face-to-face education is very important, especially science education. Thank you very much for everything. I'm so sorry. My English is very, very bad. I know. I'm sorry.
I was just thinking to thank you all. It's easy for us because that's what we speak. But the fact that you all are speaking in another language with new people, learning, we are so grateful. And this is one of the ways we can connect. And we thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Maybe we can continue to move around the world. We're zigzagging a bit, but I think that's great. We've been from Chile to Southeast Asia. My old friend Renuga, you're here, right? It would be great to go to
India.
South Asia and South India to Tamil Nadu from Sona College.
Hello, everyone. Yes, thank you, sir.
Yes, lovely to see you again.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I joined a little late, sir. Today we had college, so I had to come a little late and join late. I'm just
but great, you're yes, yeah.
Is my voice audible, sir? Is my voice
You're
audible?
audible, yeah, and it would be lovely if you could say something about your context as well.
This conference, we presented actually a paper on eclectic approach to improving the reading skills of students at the tertiary level. We wanted to actually do more on the area of metaphors and linguistics. We are just trying to learn things, and we were not able to do much in this conference. So we presented a paper on the earlier research we were doing on eclectic approach. So I'm just trying to learn some articles. Professor Christina had sent an article on COVID metaphor. I was going through that, and I happened to come across certain terms which were actually familiar, but then in Indian context, it is also used. Those metaphors like warriors and other things we happen to come across, but it is not used much, since it's all not much used in the news and other things. We happen to read in articles. I'm trying to learn all these things. I'm not really have not done research in this particular area, this COVID metaphors. I'm trying to get to know things. Otherwise, I have good association with, we have started a good association with HEDRA and Professor Matheson. We have been in touch with you for quite some time, since 2006. So it's really a good thing to be with you all. I'm happy to meet so many people across the globe now. Thank you.
Yes, lovely to meet you again. And
Thank you.
You kindly invited me to a virtual conference in December last year, which was great, hosted by your Sona College. And having been hosted by you actually in person in 2006, I look forward to next opportunity to return to,
Yes,
your institution. And I think in future we will have blended conferences. We certainly don't want to lose the tremendous ability to meet from so many different parts of the world virtually. But if we can blend that with face-to-face, that would be really great.
Certainly, yes, sir. Yes, sir. After this pandemic, we'll certainly meet. We'll certainly meet
Yeah.
in our campus, and
Yeah.
we'll also visit your campuses. Yes.
Great. Now we may come back to metaphor. I think that's one of the motifs running through. And I was thinking about this in relation to pain. What you said, Dr. Pasquale, about pain, Pasquale. That's been something that of very great importance to us in healthcare communication, and partly inspired by a paper that Michael Halliday wrote, was published in '98 on the grammar of pain, because the key point in that paper was what a difficult experience pain is. And how different languages may reflect the difficulty, construct the difficulty for us by modeling it in different ways, including then, of course, the metaphorical models. And that was followed up by a similar study for Japanese, Motoko Hori, and a similar study for Greek, Laskartu, a book. So this might indeed be something we can pursue across our community, the way in which we deal with pain, for example, in the different languages involved in. So that would be fascinating, certainly.
Yes, Christian, I also wanted to add that the grammar of pain has also been applied in Portuguese, in Brazilian Portuguese by Dr. Figueiredo. And we are also working on that for Spanish. So if there are contributions from Japanese and Greek, well, so there's a lot going on there, and it definitely has been an enormous contribution to our understanding of the experience of pain, which is going to be particularly important now during and after the pandemic, when we see so much suffering, regardless of how we code it, how we express it in language or in some other semiotic systems. Yeah, but I think there's a lot to do. One thing that that I'm always worried about is how do we move from what we do in the academy, what we do with our research, to speaking to colleagues from the health discipline, putting that into practice, because I know that happens systematically in certain countries, and doctors have headlines that they can follow about how to conduct their communication with their patients. But that is certainly not the case in many other countries. I know that in South America, where I come from, they do their best, but with very limited knowledge. They really don't get the contributions from other fields of knowledge. I don't know if that is your case in some other countries. I don't know how much health communication you are exposed to when you study medicine, for example. I know that there are some health professionals here.
You bring up a fascinating question, and I think it's a one for broad issues, and I'd like to pursue that and several others. Let me just do a bit of housekeeping for a moment, because I think that we all anticipate an hour, but we're coming on to the 50th minute, and I would like to offer
We
people to
can
extend
take as long
beyond.
as we like.
Yeah, I'd like to extend as long as people would like to and be able to be on. And if people need to leave, certainly we understand that too, but we would welcome a longer conversation if people are able to do that. Before we get into those issues, and Dr. Pascual, I thank you for asking that question. I know that and some others are there anticipating to do this, but we have a few people we haven't heard from yet in terms of introductions. So I'm just going to ask Dr. DeCourcy to kind of help us make sure that we've had a chance to hear from everybody.
All right. Dr. Kanchanamala, could you introduce yourself, please? And also Dr. Hu, Young Hu, could you introduce yourselves? So Dr. Kanchanamala is also from, I believe, from Chennai. Could you just say a few words about yourself?
Good evening, everybody. Hello. I'm Dr. Kanchanamala. I'm from the southern part of India, Tamil Nadu. I work in an engineering college. I have more than 16 years of experience. And my field of research is teaching soft skills and improving the language skills of students. I have an ardent desire to teach all skills, especially the 4 language skills, to students. Thank you.
Thank you. We all know what it's like to multitask. Dr. Young Hu, could you go next, please? Are you with us? I think you need to unmute your microphone. All right. While Dr. Hu's working on that, Dr. Sakyarada, could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you? Perhaps unmute your microphone. All right, let's try Dr. Rajalakshmi. All right, while people are working on their microphones, I'm going to ask Eleni's PhD students, so this is Mr. Marino and Mr. Junior, to just introduce themselves, please. Nice to see you, gents.
Okay, as Professor Laine said, I'm a Brazilian and I'm also a linguist, and I'm working with psychotherapy. And I have the same concern of the Professor Pascual, that I want to bring my learnings to help in the professional context. So I'm working in the therapy session to understand how the psychologist and the patient, they are communicating, and how this can help to bring a more efficient, communication. So that's my focus.
Great, thank you.
Hello, everyone. Elaine is my advisor. I'm Junior, I'm Brazilian. I'm a PhD student, and I'm going to study in my PhD the relationship between pharmacist and patient in order to conduct the benefits of pharmaceutical care. This area of studies, there are a lot of studies being conducted in this area here in Brazil, but all the data that they are collected, they focus on pharmaceutical analysis. And I'm going to study it in a different perspective. I'm going to analyze the data from the linguistics view, and I'm going to focus on this part to know how this works to develop the pharmaceutical care with the patients. And I'm going to study the context of drugstores, because as Elaine said some minutes ago, this is so rare here in Brazil. There are few papers here in Brazil that talks about this area itself, especially linguistics. And I'm going to conduct this study to understand how the language works on pharmaceutical care and how this can be good for the patients themselves, because the focus of us pharmacists is the patient. And yeah, that's all. Thanks for the opportunity here to talk to you.
And Dr. Junior, you're a pharmacist, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
And so you're going to be working with the sort of collecting information with the interviews with other pharmacists and drugstore workers.
Yes, actually, I'm going to record the interaction between pharmacists and patients in the drugstore. And I'm going to analyze how this interaction works to the development of healthcare and also the pharmaceutical care. But I'm not going to focus on the pharmacists themselves. I'm going to study the interaction between the patient and the pharmacist. However, of course, as I am a pharmacist, I know how to some pharmacists use the language to conduct some services in the clinics, because here in Brazil there are some pharmacists, there are some drugstores that there are clinics inside, and the population see us like we are not pharmacists, we are like doctors or nurses. So I need to know how the pharmacist works himself, and not looking at the population as they look us as other type of jobs. And I'm going to focus on the interaction, not only on the pharmacist.
Right. And your brother's a pharmacist.
Yes, yes.
So you can make him collect data with you.
Yes, of course, but he's a little bit shy. I tried to talk to him about collecting the data with him and said, no, not with me, because I'm so shy. But I also have a lot of friends that they are pharmacists, and I hope they help me to collect the data, and I'm going to be good at my analysis. And this is going to be a really good opportunity to understand how the language works in healthcare in a different perspective, because not only with physicians or with nurses, but in this context of drugstores. And this is really important here in Brazil, because the drugstores are seen sometimes like hospitals. People go to the pharmacy because we have free consultant with the pharmacist. So this is really good, and I'm so excited to start conducting this research.
Thank you.
Christina, I wonder if we might just put for context for the rest of the group who may not know about some of this work. This is work going on not only in Brazil, but in parts of Southeast Asia, where we're looking at how pharmacies play a very central role in not only communication of information and knowledge about healthcare, but the different medications. And I think the opportunity here is to recognize that this can be across different countries, and maybe we can find some common themes. I also want to have a chance to make sure that we capture some common themes that people are thinking about before we end this today. And I know it's being recorded, but I do know that we've talked about metaphor, we've talked about pain. Dr. Pascal has talked about that, and I think that the illustration of the way we think about pain is something that has come up, and I think that the issue of different kinds of descriptors and multimedia is fascinating in that regard. I'm wondering if we could also perhaps explore a little bit, sorry, my cat's walking across my computer, how we might look at the two countries that are very big, that have suffered greatly from COVID. I'm not talking about the United States, although we have had our own share, but how it is seen, and how maybe it's messaged in the countries, and how people perceive leadership in that country as helping or hindering the messaging. And I'm thinking particularly, for instance, of India and Brazil. I'm wondering if there's a place where we might have an exchange of thoughts about exploring that a little bit, and how we can, again, work to find ways of moving what we are experiencing to something that we can share with the rest of the world. I think that one of the things I see without this is the networking and then sharing this, because we are on the cusp of an opportunity here that many people will not have. We have the COVID crisis, but we have a virtual platform to get together, and we have people from different disciplines and from around the world. And we've talked about this, but how can we take it the next step, if you would? And then, of course, we also talk about education in the different contexts as well. So we have many areas to talk about. I'm just opening the floor. I'm just one that's just using my opportunity here to encourage people to jump in and go from there. And we'll try and record some of these themes.
Brooke, can I say a few words?
Please.
One of the opportunities that I'd like to throw out for people is I had the opportunity to work with a linguist. I'm a general internist, and the combination of a clinician and a researcher who had communication skills training, we found very effective. And so we were able to make the work by the linguist practical enough for the clinicians so that they were able to incorporate it into their work. So one of the things we found when we started looking at audio tapes of visits was that the doctor asked a question, why are you here? And then
真主任来人家电脑上以为就自己人好猛啊！你看，最后一个白发苍苍。我看一下再说一下。你看这几个人，不是他们应该是教授。
Please.
他们有几个好老。这几个我的学生。我在忙什么？他在叫我。你是这样的我。
So we had the chance to work together and make the understandings of our work, as Mariana said, applicable to the practitioners, because we translated what the researchers found into useful information for how the clinicians could do their jobs better. And so that the doctors weren't as defensive. And I wondered if people have tried using that technique in their own work or would be interested in searching out colleagues who are clinical people who might be interested. I think the idea of a pharmacist studying with other pharmacists about how to make the communication more effective would be particularly useful in the pharmacy community, accepting those pieces of advice. So I just add that, and I'd be happy to share the paper that we wrote about that. So if people want to look at the methodology, they would certainly be invited to do that.
Howard, if you happen to have the citation for that, you could put it in the chat. If not, we'll certainly get that around another day.
I will, if you don't mind going to my resource, I'll go get it and put it in.
Howard, thank you for that. Thank you for that. That was great, and I think that people could certainly learn from your methodology. That was a seminal paper, if I recall.
It was very effective.
And I think changed the way that physicians communicate if they were thoughtful about learning what you were sharing.
Yes.
I think in medicine, I mean, I'm a pediatrician and who has taught communication skills for probably 25 or 30 years. And I think that it's very hard. It's seen as a soft skill, something soft, not hard. It's not science. It's not cell receptors. And you know, when you're first teaching residents in their early training, or sometimes students, they are very worried about the details. And then once they get a little more comfortable with the scientific pieces, then they're a little bit more open to learning communication skills. But I think it's absolutely crucial. I was part of the Kalamazoo Consensus Statement group where we developed a framework for communication skills across North America. And there are certain communication frameworks or models that people use, but also what I've been teaching in the last, 10 or 15 years is really being human, bringing our authentic selves to the relationship, realizing that you are part of that relationship. It's not just doctor to patient. It's like it's two people interacting. It's a dyad. And so they influence each other and they affect each other. So it's really part of a dyadic relationship that's very important. So I think the relationship piece is really, really important. And how we relate to each other and what we can do to help people understand that more and apply it more.
I wonder too, if you might just say a few words about the importance of relationships in maintaining resilience and well-being among the care providers, particularly in the time of COVID and the phenomenon of moral distress that people have experienced, particularly the caregivers, where they felt helpless. And I know that this gets to the issue of Dr. Pascual with pain in a number of different ways. It gets to the issue of Dr. Atkinson talking about trying to coach people to stay well, if you would. I'm wondering if we can have maybe some brief comments about how to look at this and understand it.
Yeah, I think one of the hardest things is that, and I think this happened in many countries, if not all, of having to really ramp up and just treat dying patients and save lives. And I know that it was really hard to communicate. People weren't allowed in the intensive care units, not the families. And so being there alone, and how do you make connections and how do you relate to each other in that situation? And I think the doctors and nurses were so overwhelmed by the situation. And we began actually on another project that I'm on. We were teaching primary care physicians how to communicate, because in the intensive care unit, doctors weren't able to talk as much to the families, so they would have them talk with the primary care physician that knew the families, before they were in the hospital. But I think the moral distress happens because we had shortages of ventilators, of staff, of protective equipment, which was just a very large, challenging situation. And you would know what you should do or what action you'd want to take, and you couldn't do it because the resources weren't there. And I think in many countries, some handled it much better than others. But there was really no way to really handle it. And then people feel a moral distress or moral injury, because particularly in medicine, in nursing, you're really raised in a way, you're enculturated, your professional identities to help, to bear witness to suffering, to help heal. And people were sort of prevented from doing that. And so I think in those relationships, just in general, that can be very rewarding, but also helping each other, on the front lines, in the hospitals, helping each other, debriefing, talking about the relationships, talking about how you feel, giving people space to reflect on what was going on. I think that's been really key. And I'm hoping it won't happen again, in the sense that, the Delta variant is coming up, and I think that there's beginning to be some spread more, and I hope we can sort of get our hands around this and sort of limit that. But I think we're in a better place than we were. We've learned a great deal, both scientifically and relationship wise. So, but it's a tough go. I mean, we're all in a very difficult situation. So we need each other.
May I jump in, Dr. Ryder? I think when we talk about compassion, we go back to what Dr. Pascual said in terms of pain.
Yes.
Because it's not only physical pain, it's also emotional pain. And I think this was the type of pain that came out during the pandemic and still going on in some places. Here in João Pessoa, 24 hours, nobody getting in the hospital because of COVID, nobody dying of COVID for the past 48 hours. So we're fighting it happily, I think. But I wonder, how is this compassion maintained during all those hectic times that doctors and the frontliners had to face?
Yes.
I wonder if it's the same around the globe, how different it is or not. And how is it that the emotional side of doctors, clinicians in general, was affected? I wonder, we're talking, Dr. Brook talked about the two big countries, India on one side and Brazil on the other side. How different was it? How similar was it? So I think going back to your question, Dr. Root, maybe we can think about research in these lines: pain, compassion, physical pain, mental pain. And then we can go around all these topics that we have been talking about. I wonder what Dr. Renuga thinks in terms of this, going, you know, from Brazil to India. How was this really, really done? Because you guys, we all had to act to something that we had no idea of the ways how we did it. Dr. Howard talked about being trained. I do agree. I think it's wonderful. I have written down your paper already, but I'm thinking about in the banking sector, for example. We went there, we did TNA, training needs analysis, and we conducted research. We also did that, Professor Forey and Lockwood, they carried out research in call centers. But then how about in a pandemic? You cannot train anyone for that. So how is it that you maintain your compassion on those crazy moments that we went through? So Dr. Renuga, how was it? Is there any research? Is there anything being carried out there so we can maybe get the ball running? You know, we're soccer players here. Maybe we can get the ball running and discuss this kind of aspect.
Sure. I'll also connect with what Professor Elizabeth Ryder and you also have quoted. Last year, when the first wave started, am I audible? Is my voice audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. When the first wave started in the month of March in India, people were really not aware of what was happening across the globe. And many didn't even believe that there was a virus spread like this across the country, across the world. And people were very reluctant to stay at home. It was happening for quite some time, and government had to impose a lot of restrictions, lockdowns, and we were able to control to a certain extent. But within the hospitals and other things, I was able to personally experience this because my husband fell sick during this time. In the month of August, he suddenly had fever and he was experiencing breathlessness. And immediately we didn't know what to do because it was complete lockdown and we had to take him to the hospital. And there, the doctors immediately suspected this to be COVID. But I knew that it was not COVID because he used to have this allergic to cold and other things. He used to take fruits, a lot of fruits. And so I thought it must be because of that. And he never used to take hot water at all. So when we went to doctors, they immediately wanted us to take a test, a swab test, and we took the swab test. That night, I had to stay in the government hospital taking care of my husband. And there I could see some of the other inmates in the hospital. There were few wards, beds nearby our ward. And there people were literally, I could see that people did not realize what those scan reports said, and they could not read those scan reports. And when I read my husband's scan report, I understood that this was heavy lung infection. And next day we got the report that it was negative report, corona. There was no corona infection, and we were happy about it. But then I felt pity about the people who were staying in the next bed, because I think he must have got positive result, and the wife who was attending.
Oh, Dr. Renuga, your microphone is muted. There we go.
Yeah, I got a call. That is why I had to decline. So that lady, she literally didn't understand what the nurse was communicating to her. And she was talking in Tamil only. That nurse was talking, the attender was talking only in Tamil. But then this lady, poor lady, she did not understand what she was talking, and she wanted me to explain. She was quoting some words and she was asking whether this is heavy infection. I could see that it was heavily infected, and the report clearly stated that it was corona infection. Then I had to talk to her and tell her that because that government hospital is a safe place. I could see all the young doctors there. They were all just PG students, and they were taking so much care of the patients around. There must have been so many patients, and people were running here and there. It was midnight. Okay, when we went to the hospital, it was around 10 o'clock, and we got discharged only in the next day morning. But all these happened throughout the night. I was watching these things happening around. And this lady, I told her that this is a safe place and they'll immediately admit the patient in the corona ward and he'll be taken care of. I couldn't even forget that patient's name. His name was Balakrishnan because the nurse was calling his name and they were taking him to the ward. So I still wonder whether the patient was saved and things like that. But communication was lacking there. People were not able to explain things patiently to the attenders who were staying with the patient. So it's really tough. Professor Ryder was talking about the soft skills and communication. That was lacking. So, but we cannot blame the doctors and doctors and the nurses there, because they were also very stressed. I saw one of the nurses staying from morning 8 o'clock till the next day 8 o'clock without taking any rest.
Yes, this
So
is
it
a
was
problem,
all,
I think, in a number
yeah,
of places. So
yeah,
can we hear more broadly from our Brazilian friends? Have you seen similar things with communication issues with COVID?
yes, I would, yeah, please.
Yeah, I luckily didn't have any type of experience with COVID. I was happily in lockdown, still is, and family members, nobody had to go out. But I want to pass the word to Junior to talk about what he has seen within, because he was working in a pharmacy, and how things changed from night to day. One thing that he mentioned to me is that people had nowhere to go anymore. So they went to the pharmacy.
Yes.
They wanted to go out and do something. So they went to the pharmacy. Can you comment a bit on that, Junior?
Yeah, I started working in the pharmacy in 2019. And the job that I conducted between October 2019 and March 2020 was something lighter. But when the pandemic started in March, everything changed. And it changed in a way that I haven't expected, because we had lots of lockdowns here in my city, in João Pessoa. We spent about 100 or more than 100 days in lockdown. And as Elaine mentioned, a lot of people didn't want to stay home and they went to the pharmacy, because the pharmacy was one of the places here that they were opened. And as I was working there, I could see that the population arrived in the pharmacy asking for some help. I could see on their faces that they were asking for help. Help because they didn't want to stay home. It was something unbelievable for us, because it was the first time that here we had this type of situation. Stay at home, we couldn't go out, we couldn't see friends, we couldn't hug, we couldn't kiss. This was something really strange for us here in Brazil. And a lot of people arrived in the pharmacy asking for help. And this worked a lot on my mind, because I needed to talk to a lot of patients in the pharmacy, because after leaving the hospital, the first place where the patients would go was the pharmacy, with a lot of prescriptions. And sometimes the patients had a lot of questions, because these questions weren't cleared up in the hospital, because there were a lot of people in the hospital, a lot of patients, a lot of work to be conducted in the hospital, and the doctors and the nurses were really tired, and sometimes they didn't have a lot of time to explain how to use the correct medicine. And I myself, as a pharmacist, I needed to breathe in, breathe out a lot, and explain to the population, especially in one of the pharmacies that I worked that is located in a very poor area here in my city. And because of that, I needed to use the language in different ways, because sometimes I need to explain how they needed to take the medicine. I need to read all the prescription to see how the doctor prescribed each medicine. And for the population, as I told you, they were asking for help. But as the pandemic progresses here in Brazil, things got worse, and a lot of people started going to the pharmacy again, and more people in the pharmacy, and they're working a lot. Sometimes when I arrived home, I was so tired, and I wasn't in the front line, but I was on a second front line, I could say that. And I was exhausted, especially in my mind, because I needed to be talking a lot, need to talk a lot with the patients. And they had a lot of questions, and this was so tiring. Sometimes I didn't have breaks in the pharmacy. I had 15-minute break, but sometimes I couldn't take this break because I was talking to the patients, talking to my team in the pharmacy, because they were exhausted too, because they needed to treat a lot of interactions with the patient and a lot of people going to the pharmacy, because it was the place that it was free to talk and to clear up the questions. Yeah. And what the progressing of the pandemic, more work, conducting more work, and getting very tired. And this is this is the experience that I had in the pharmacy. And sometimes I thought, oh my God, I'm in a front line, a different front line, but I'm in the front line too. And when I talked to sometimes here with my brother, because he's also a pharmacist, he said the same, that he was exhausted. And I could imagine. So how doctors and nurses in the hospital would be. They are so tired, exhausted, with the journey of work, 24 hours working with no rest. And yeah, this is unbelievable, but I faced this, I had this experience. I need to say that looking at this time and this perspective, I could say that I could help a lot of people using the language, of course, because it was so important to use the language to help people. And this was so excited for me, because I really enjoyed having this opportunity. I left the pharmacy, but I'm still a pharmacist, and I try to look at this pandemic in a different way. And what I have to say is that people were asking for help, and they are still asking for help. Thanks God, the things here in Brazil are, the number of cases and deaths are decreasing a lot. Thanks God. This is amazing for the country, because we faced very hard times, and especially in the beginning of this year. It was something unbelievable, the number of cases, deaths, and people also asking for help too. And this is my experience, and I'm so glad to share this experience with you, because I'm talking to you about a different perspective. I'm talking about my country, and I think everybody knows that the reality here in Brazil, in terms of COVID-19, is something terrible. But now, thanks God, the things are getting better.
I am hearing a very interesting combination of themes here that I'd like to see if we can maybe tease out some of the threads. Thank you very much, Junior, for that, because I think that you shared with us the frontline experience and the exhaustion and the burnout that many people are experiencing, the physicians, the pharmacists, the nurses, everyone. I think we have several different themes here, one from a kind of an organizational approach, and how we can trust the communications coming, whether it's from our leaders or from the scientists, from the doctors, from the people who should be sharing us, and having some consistency of communication about what really is happening. And yet I'm hearing both in Brazil and India, that did not filter down to the common person, if you would, in so many parts of the country. And at the same time, I'm also hearing the thread of exhaustion and burnout, which has an impact on the way that we care for patients. Dr. Atkinson, I'm wondering if you might just address that a little bit, and then maybe Dr. Matheson can talk about the way that the systems are built or not built in terms of communication.
I'd be glad to talk about the comment about burnout. And as I was listening to you speak very eloquently, I thought about all the themes you were talking about in the pharmacy, which were exactly what we were seeing here with our physician faculty who were clinical faculty, as well as who taught our students. In addition to the project that I was working on, we also did what we called a COVID coaching project. We have a dozen physicians in our physician coaching consortium at the medical school. And so we reached out to do pro bono coaching for all frontline physicians. And I was coaching with some emergency room doctors who were frontline during this time as well. And the themes that we would hear would be this sense of being completely overwhelmed by the needs of the patients. But there was another theme that we would hear in terms of how the doctors were having to watch people die without those patients having the ability to have connection to their own family members. And I'll never forget some of the doctors I talked to who said how helpless they felt when they stood there wearing their PPE with an iPad with someone who was dying, who was wanting to connect with their family members. So in terms of the moral injury that Dr. Ryder talked about in her talk, I saw this and heard it played out. So that is one of the reasons why we began doing our wellness project that we did with our faculty, because we were trying to provide a way where everyone could have connection. So the thing that I found seemed to be helpful for the people with burnout and who were struggling with the effects of chronic stress that they were feeling from working in this pandemic is being able to find a safe place where they could connect and they could interact with their peers and everyone discuss, how am I maintaining my wellness? Which, as a psychiatrist, I almost wanted to ask, how are you maintaining your sanity? Because we know those things are connected, intimately connected. And so one of the things that we did was really work with people using some extremely simple, very straightforward, I'm sure everyone here is familiar with them, mindfulness techniques to help people so that they could find a way when they were overwhelmed to take 2 minutes to literally work on some mindfulness exercises related to their own breathing, their own conceptualization, their own being in touch with where they were in order to deal with this. I'll just make one other comment, and that is I have a concern as a psychiatrist that now that here in Texas, here in the States, if you will, we are not in the thick of it as we were. Yes, it's still problematic, but we're not in the middle of that horrible crisis we were in. And what is now starting to come out of the woodwork is that we are seeing people finally paying attention to the mental health impact it had upon them. And I think there's getting ready to be a tsunami of need for mental health. And I just wanted to make one other comment related to the connection. The gentleman who's doing the studying of psychotherapy, we're actually finding that people are able to get their connection needs met through therapy. I work with a number of therapists. I work with patients, and with my other hat on, I work with patients and using this platform. And believe it or not, it is providing some benefit, which I find personally amazing.
I think that's a really good point, that it's been a very, very painful experience for those of us, you know, that are on the front line, that are taking care of patients, that are taking care of families in these very difficult situations. And I think we're getting better at it. I'm hoping that this is going to bring our world a little more thinking of us as human beings, a little more focus on values, a little more focus on really caring deeply for each other and giving each other room to reflect. And I want to say that it also has to do with the organizational or the institutional culture, the hospital culture, the academic health center culture, the clinic culture, and what's happening from up top. And I think we've been putting some papers in the chat, so I'd encourage you to, if for some reason you can't download the chat, just click on the links and you should go to the links. But I think that that's, we have to work on the culture too. We often say that there's a metaphor about canaries in the coal mine, that the canary went into a coal mine, was in a coal mine, and it would tell the coal miners if the canary died, terrible to say, it would tell you that there's not enough oxygen in the coal mine. So the thing that we think about is that if you have to focus on the coal mine, you have to focus on the institution as well, because if you give the canary well-being training and support, it's going to help, and that's important. But ultimately, it's the culture, the organizational culture. So there will be papers around about that. The other thing I want to say is that we're going to have coming out from British Medical Journal, from BMJ, an article on mental health and well-being in children and adolescents in the time of COVID and what that's done. And so that's something we've been working on for almost a year, and whenever it is in press, so we can keep you posted on that.
I want to thank Dr. Atkinson and Dr. Ryder both for expressing this as a very important point. And I think the piece that I'm hearing, in addition to the organizational structure, is the sense that these people who are there, who are feeling overwhelmed, can have a safe place to feel vulnerable and to share that vulnerability without being criticized, without being challenged, but being supported. And I think that that's what you both are saying. And the institutions need to structure that, whether or not it's with therapists, with additional counseling, or just providing a safe place. And I think that Dr. Ryder has talked about this in some of her work, where if you're going to bring people together to work in different disciplines, to be able to be real, to feel as though you're not being criticized, but you're safe, and you can express your worries, your concerns, your interests as one human to another, and be respected for that, is really the critical piece. And I think that the juniors' comments about feeling overwhelmed, to me, really strikes home to the issue of we need those safe places, and particularly when you are being that for patients, who provides that for you, I think is what's being said. And I think that's the resiliency component that we try and find whatever way we do this. I still come back to the metaphor of pain and how we represent it, both psychic pain as well as chronic pain, because I think we understand it differently. I will say that as a physician, I see men and women experiencing pain differently, just as a gender-related issue. And I don't mean to paint with a broad brush, but my experience has been that men see pain very differently than women. I think that's hardwired into the biology of men and women. But I think the expression of distress and being out of control is a very big piece of all of this, and the vulnerability that comes with it.
And hopefully, if we have better maps of this, we can use this understanding to help people cope with pain. I mean, of course, it's on different levels, including biological level, biological medical level. But Marianne Perspard, you talked about chronic pain, how we manage this. And I think the understanding of the way that we understand pain is actually helpful, including metaphors, but not only metaphors. I think that's very, very crucial. I mean, something in what you, yeah, please.
Yeah, if I can make a comment on that. In the case of women, and going back to what Brooke was saying, the cultural aspect is very, very important, because in many cultures, women are somehow expected to suffer, or they have to be strong and deal with pain because of their possibility of having children, and because of their menstrual cycles and everything. So the idea of pain is more closely related to women in many cultures. So there is some idea in certain societies that when a man complains, it's more somehow valid or reliable or something like that. But the female pain has been normalized to a very large extent in many cultures, and that is something that is very dangerous, because there's a clear challenge to the identity of who you are when you say you are in pain and somebody doesn't believe you. It's a very terrible experience. Yeah.
I would like to just say, as a male and with 4 sisters, a wife and a daughter, I understand this, and I also want to say that I feel that unfortunately, for much of the world, women are still not seen as equals to men, and that whether they need to take care of them, or the women need to be a step behind, or that they're expected to suffer, or that their voices aren't heard, or that their reality is not the same, that the men choose what the reality is for women. And I find that distressing, horrible, and something we need to change. But unfortunately, even in this country, which should be theoretically a beacon of light, we're seeing our Supreme Court, for example, turn a conservative eye to many things. And it is very distressing how in this country, for example, the issue of reproductive rights is now going backwards 100 years. And I just am struck by this compared to many other parts of the world. So I share this because I think that what you're saying, Rihanna, is absolutely the case. And I think that the psychic pain, which is something we need to have a venue for, because I wonder if the psychic pain is something, and we see this with people who suffered early childhood events, traumatic events, for example, and who live with psychic pain and they are depressed and their lives often end earlier. How do we recognize and deal with that as a society and support them? And this is a much broader issue, but it is around the world. And COVID is one more example of this, where people are suffering psychic pain that Dr. Atkinson was talking about, others talking about, that comes out later.
Men and women feel the same pain, you know. It's just like, but men don't want to talk about it. We keep in our heart, then we pain more, you know. But we men, you always, when you pain, you feel, you talk, and you cry, and then after that you feel better. But men don't do that, and we keep it to ourselves, and then we get more pain. So that's my opinion.
That's also a cultural problem, as
But we're all human. We all feel pain, and we all handle it in different ways.
Yeah.
I have really appreciated this concept that I hadn't come across before, Dr. Ryder, in your talk, of moral distress and moral injury, because I think one of the things that has been difficult for many people in this pandemic is the moral distress and the moral injury of seeing governments who have, and whole systems that are failing, the doctors failing, the medical personnel failing, the patients, and that, you know, we can see such a long-term hollowing out of all of the budgets and all of the support and so on. And then how does one begin to believe enough to try to make a difference? So, I mean, I'm thinking about what it's like to be young in the pandemic. Soria and I have been looking at the stress levels and the anxiety levels of young people in Cambodia who are anxious for their families, who are worried for people. You know, I think the moral distress, the moral injury just adds a huge burden there.
Oh, yeah, it really does. And I don't know the solution. I think we all have to come together individually, but also the culture. I mean, the culture, the organizational culture, the organizations, and it's difficult in certain countries. I know, particularly here, it's a business. It's not a great thing. And so, you know, people can, for example, the emergency, one institution I'm aware of, the emergency room doctors have been obviously working extremely hard in this time of COVID. And then they just decided to save money and not give them, you know, have them have a pay cut. And that's like, what is that about? While the administrators are making millions of dollars. So that's a problem, not in every country, which is very fortunate. and probably not in most countries, but I think we really, overall, it's being more humane, taking better care of everyone in the society, in the world. I know that sounds very altruistic, but I think it's part of the issue of all of us human beings.
I think so. I mean, one thing that I think is what comes through here and elsewhere is how extremely complex healthcare systems are. And of course, there's been very interesting research comparing fault tolerance, risk in different complex systems like air control systems, power plants, and healthcare systems. We know that healthcare systems are much more complex because the human factor is much bigger. But my impression is the emphasis is more on the sort of the field of operation. But the complexity is, of course, precisely also the value systems, empathy, rapport, and so on. And I think in comparison with the operation of power plants, nuclear power plants, air control systems, and so on, that is not foregrounded. But we need fault tolerance systems in both respects, it seems to me, both in terms of the field of operation and in terms of the tenor relationships of value systems and so on. And this extended COVID-19 crisis, it seems to me, has highlighted this in ways that, so that's in a sense a silver lining. It's something that we now, that's more part of the public discourse. People are more generally aware of it. It gets into the media and so on, and hopefully we can work with that to in positive ways, including educational ways.
Christian, I hear what you're saying, and I think that your point is that if we can be learning organisms and learn from this crisis and see where we have failed as a healthcare system and as societies to respond to this, whether or not we're talking about emergency preparedness and be able to recognize these things before they happen again, better epidemiologic means, contact tracing, things like this for pandemics, but more so the issue of how we structure our healthcare systems and the care we provide for patients and how we don't let people get into trouble and we make sure that it's more equitable and so on. I'm going to ask Howard to come back in now because Howard his talk was about this in the United States having the most expensive healthcare system, but one that does not necessarily give the best healthcare. And I think that the question would come was whether or not any of the countries that have experienced this can learn to adjust their systems or their systems too embedded politically and economically and culturally to be able to turn. In other words, can you turn an aircraft carrier on a dime? And you can't. Can you turn a healthcare system in response to the COVID to say we've learned lessons and we're going to make sure we have enough ventilators, we have enough PPE, we have enough resources, we have supply chains that work, we have enough resilient people and so on. Howard, do you have thoughts about that?
I think what I've learned from the ineffectiveness of the US healthcare system to meet the needs of its population is that what Atul Gawande wrote about was slow ideas, is that anytime you're having people at the top of a system deciding what is best for the people in the country, the system is not going to be very useful. So the idea to me is to integrate the population to be served into the planning process and to actually try and design a system that is focused on meeting the needs of the population rather than meeting the needs of the people on top or the administrators or the business people, and that our system is incapable of doing that because it's so embedded in the process of making money. Other countries, I'd be interested in knowing if it's still possible for health workers, people in government, the population as a whole, to come together and try and decide how they would create a system that would be focused on meeting the needs of the people rather than meeting the needs of the business executives. So That's my thought.
Wow, well said. Thank you. Love to hear from the rest of you about this.
I would like to share about the system in Thailand. Now we are suffering a lot about the pandemic because the number of new cases has been reported. And what Dr. Howard said is truly true in Thailand because the top people, they just do what they want, but they don't think about the population. And now people are suffering, and also we have got sort of a group of volunteers trying to help, like the new cases of COVID-19 to get into the hospital, because now we are in the crisis of shortage of our equipment, and also for live workers, many of them got infected. So the policy making in terms of distributing the vaccine is a problem in Thailand now. And what I think that it would be interesting to look at is the healing message that the frontline workers talk to the relative of the COVID patients, because the COVID patient will be in the hospital if they get a bed to get into the hospital. But now we have got so many cases, infected cases, that have to stay at home. And they try to get into the hospital, a group of volunteers helping to get a place in the hospital. So like the volunteer group have to communicate with the family that they are trying hard to get a place for your loved one. So the healing message is also important. And I think that this also happened in Cambodia, in India. So the healing message, or like what Christian has said about the value, the culture that we, humanities that we have to think about.
I'm hearing what you're saying too, is that the leaders are not really being effective and standing on a higher moral plane to do their job. Instead, they are allowing the people at the lower levels to try and suffer through the shortages of equipment, of resources, and having to deal with the families because the leaders are isolated from that and are insulated from that. And I'm wondering how we can more effectively get messages to the leaders. I look at this country with our former president, who refused to believe that the COVID was even a pandemic, and that he saw it going away by early spring and so on, and continued to message this, and how that impacted the way that much of the country perceived it and dealt with it and didn't come to grips with it. And we ended up having over 600,000 people die in this country. And as far as I'm concerned, probably 400,000 of them should not have died if we'd had better leadership. And if I were to say it, I would say that you have to hold those leaders accountable in one way or another. And I think the same thing is true in Brazil. I don't know about India, but I know some other countries, and I'm wondering what we as care providers, we as educated members of the public looking at trying to respond to this, can find a way to message this. Well, we may not be able to change the structure of the healthcare industry, as Dr. Beckman was saying, but how can we try and find speak truth to power, if you would, in terms of moral courage to say we need to change this? Is that a question, a fair question?
Professor, I would like to add one point here about leaders. In India, is my voice audible, sir?
Yep.
In India, the leaders are really doing very well. They are getting into the field, and they are checking in the hospitals and other areas. They are doing really well. We had a change in the political system after the election. There was a different party which came into power. Even then, the measures, the preventive measures and other measures related to COVID was seamlessly going on. So it was all good. So as far as the measures taken from the government, we are really very satisfied, or else it would have been a big disaster to a country like India, where the population is really huge. So it is good here. From their part, they are doing really well. But people, since the population is very high here, things are sometimes it looks like it is out of control, but it's really under control here. It's not really bad as other country people or others outside the country think. It's really good here, and we are trying to bring things under control. So since each state has its own party, they are taking care of things. So leaders are really good here, sir. They are doing their best.
May I just break in and introduce Professor Jim Gritton. Jim, nice to see you. How are you?
Sorry, I thought I was muted, but I'm not. I was looking for the unmute. I'm very well. I'm sorry to join you so late. I was at an optician, and I thought it would be half an hour, and in the end, it was about an hour and a half. So glad to catch the end of this, hopefully.
Lovely. So Brooke was just bringing up the issue of holding our leaders accountable for what's happened with the poor quality leadership. Two ways we can do this, I would just like to say, are Research Project A and Research Project B. I will be writing to you all to join in these research projects. Also, looking at this from another point of view, there have been medicine vendors since the time of ancient Rome. So the reality is that when people try to deal with their medical issues, they go to the local medicine vendor. And one way and another, it's Massillon and his friends who are going to be dealing with these realities. So this is why we have started the project, Talking to Drugstore Workers, because as COVID produces new variants, and as we deal with long COVID and all the rest of it, we are going to be finding out what people are saying at the local level. And this is true in every country. So I happen to be talking to Dr. Ryder about this. This is true in America as well. So Dr. Ryder, can I ask you to just respond to this? And then I would also like to ask Kittima how she feels, because you're the expert in multimodal communication here. How do you feel we can message everyone, from leaders who don't get the message through to ordinary people? How can we message them? So can I ask the two of you to maybe kick around a few ideas? Beth, could you go first, Elizabeth, Dr. Ryder?
I'm thinking of how we can you state the question again, how we can?
Sure, we're going to be living with this for a very long time. We have messaging needs. So we need to message leaders, and we need to message ordinary people.
Boy, that's a really hard question. I don't know that there's any answer, and I think it may be different, at least to some degree, in different contexts. But one thing I do think about is, and I know I'm pounding on this, but it really comes back to our values. I mean, when we were doing our International Charter for Human Values in Healthcare, we were really thinking about it was all stakeholders. It was doctors and patients and caregivers and healthcare leaders and all of that. And I used to joke about how we'd like to then say, ask the insurance, third-party payers here in this country, that are making millions of dollars, what about compassion? What about respect? What about excellence? What about justice? What about justice in healthcare? And I think, those are things that we have to come to. And I don't know, I don't know how you hold the leaders that need to be held accountable, because some of them aren't exactly as caring people as we would hope. And so it's a very difficult thing. And some of them are much out for money, and definitely in this country, in the healthcare systems. And I really believe that healthcare is a right. It is a right that everyone should have access to it. I think that we, like what's happening in Brazil with the pharmacists and other places, you're going to your local drugstore and you're finding things there if you can't otherwise. Here, 62% of health bankruptcies, personal bankruptcies, are due to not being able to pay your medical bills. I mean, that's crazy. That's crazy. This should be a right for everyone. So That's what I believe. I don't know how to fix the leaders, though. Any other ideas about how we might do that?
Fatima, can you discuss the messaging issues? Okay.
Who are you asking?
Fatima, because
The messaging issue.
Okay, I'm sorry, my internet is not stable. Do you want me to describe about the multimodality and the okay? For me, as you know, COVID is new for everyone in this world, right? And I saw the infographic from the Ministry of Disease Control of Thailand. So I think it's just really interesting because the government sector provide the message for everyone, like for all ages, all group of people, right? So I think the content inside must be easy to understand. So I decided to examine both textual elements and non-textual elements, because like a non-textual element can tell the story on its own apart from the text, right? And I want to see how the efficiency to communicate the easy thing or the easy message for everyone. Okay, so I decided to do study on the infographics. Yes, because there are a lot of series of infographic about the COVID-19 from the department, and I choose this one because it covers all the domain, like many pages for reader to conform to. But I think because I did the research last year, and which was the first wave of COVID-19 in Thailand, and the message I found is still a basic instruction, because because at that time COVID-19 is not serious like in the fourth wave of Thailand. Yes, we now in the fourth wave because we have no vaccine for everyone right now. And I think we can see the change, I don't know, or the change or the improvement of the COVID-19 from the first wave to the current wave. And I think it is okay to examine the message from the government sector. Yes, I am not sure whether you can understand what I want to explain or not.
Thank you so much.
I'd like to just raise the question for everyone.
Yeah.
And that is the way that we communicate now. There used to be standard ways of communicating. We had a small number in this country, for instance, of news outlets, several major news sources that people trusted. And then with the internet and with social media mechanisms now taking over and a number of alternative ways of doing this, we have many different ways of messaging, and we don't really know where truth necessarily lies. And because we have different agendas and different political agendas and biases, you have to kind of understand where it's coming from. The other thing is that people more and more rely on sound bites, just a very few words to communicate something very complex. And I say this because if you look at American politics, you have the presidential candidates using a 5 or 10 word statement to try and say who they are and what they believe in. And for instance, former President Trump, and they use this as an example, argues that he lost the election, that was stolen from him, and he continues to put this forward. He continues to run on this platform, and a substantial number of people in this country still believe that the election was stolen. This 4 or 5 word soundbite that now drives the way they perceive things, whether or not they're perceiving whether or not COVID is a real issue or not, whether they should wear masks or not. And I ask this because the infographics, which I think can be very message and get it out there,